God was there for me. I would have never been anywhere else. I think if I realized, if my husband would have come in and said, hey, I'm going to stay with her, I'm going to do this, I would have said, no, you're not. I'm doing this, or we're both going to be there. I wouldn't have given up that role for anything in my entire life. I had the privilege of being there for her and advocating for her and helping her. So once I understood that my perspective was a bit broken, it allowed me to be humble and very genuine and soft as I entered those conversations with God and especially with my husband.
For those who can't see on YouTube, I've already cried a number of times in this conversation. It's such a deep thank you for sharing this. And the way that Amy and I met is we met through her husband. And her husband said, "You've got to talk to my wife because she's like the strongest person that he's ever met." And I'm curious, as you're going through this, I don't even know how to describe it, this torturous, incredibly challenging, it doesn't even do it justice, this journey, and you're starting to put yourself into this box and you're not trusting and you're starting to kind of withdraw. I mean, how did that impact your marriage in that time?
Yeah, that was really tough. My husband and I really had a lot of just disagreements, I guess you could say. We couldn't seem to get on the same page. But one thing that I didn't realize until last year was I was expecting him to meet me where I was in my feelings, in my journey. I expected him to, feel exactly how I felt. And what God showed me was that we were on our separate journeys.
Yeah.
So before I completely self-destructed, I was able to really kind of realize those things. But to kind of take you back, my husband is extremely strong. I mean, he was never going to let that happen. He was like, we're not going to do this. We're not going to go that direction, that avenue. Because also what I didn't tell you in one of my first mentor meetings, the second day that my daughter and I were in the hospital, we met with the liaison. I was given a stack of probably 12 to 15 inches high of like, this is what you're getting ready to go through, all the procedures, treatments. This is the looming, death sentence over you. Oh, and by the way, Amy, children die and 90% of the couples get divorced. So you just really need to be very well aware of this. And I've always had that on my heart for 9 years. And even though my husband and I weren't in the same place, I think that we always knew, we had to stay together. We had to stick together. But I wasn't able and capable to meet him where he was in his journey. And I think it was the same for him, for me. He just didn't know how to meet me there. And so now we've gained the perspective to know where we need to meet each other. And we can't change the past, but we can certainly change the present and the future and how we have described each of us, what we went through and what it felt like for us. And for me, it was a one-sided, I was there for my daughter for 9 years. It wasn't something that he could handle. He wasn't in the hospital. And I had to realize that that wasn't his journey. It wasn't his superpower. It wasn't his purpose. It was mine. And that was okay because he was, at home taking care of our son and being there for him. And, that was his purpose. And once I realized each of our purpose and each of our superpowers, I was able to really kind of digest and understand this process and this journey much, much better. But I never stopped thinking about all of those parents that I met along the way, all of those children. And then just, everybody that followed us as I watched that hospital double and triple, quadruple in size. And my heart just hurt. It really, really hurt. And I think God was able to bring me realization of, I think you can help people. I think people will relate to you. I think that you will allow them to talk about things that probably shouldn't talk about that because people won't like you, or, negative conversations, or you just don't want to talk about these types of things. It's not a comfortable conversation. It's not like, hey, how are you? Oh, and by the way, and here's my story. And they're trying to like chop their
Ooh.
arm off to get away from you.
Thank you for bringing a little bit of lightness to this, because this is a heavy story. But I actually, because now I'm getting to know you, I have trouble seeing the Amy that does not speak her mind, like the Amy that holds back. So I thank you for bringing a little bit of laughter to it. Um, I, I want to pause for a moment to share two things that have been incredibly insightful that I hope our listeners are really taking note of. There's just two nuggets. There's so many nuggets. Two of them that really stood out to me. One of them you said at the beginning of your story is that you have to find something every day to be grateful for. So absolutely love that. And then you said this, and this is uh, spouses out there, people who have significant others, take heed to this. You gain the perspective of where to meet each other rather than assuming that we're both on the same journey or assuming they know how you feel. You gain the perspective, and I just love so much that you gained that rather than you were forced into it or anything other than I gained the perspective of where to meet each other. And if there's someone listening right now, and I know there will be people listening to this who are engaged in the same challenge in their own journey right now, what advice can you give a listener whose spouse is in a tremendous amount of pain and they're withdrawing? How does someone support someone like that?
Yeah,
Where do we
my
start with
my
that?
little diamonds. These are my little diamond nuggets of what I realized, and what God really brought the ability was just of understanding. Just understand that you're probably not on the same page. It's probably 100% not possible for you to be on the same page. And I think having that humility and just
Yeah.
asking your spouse, how are you doing? What does this look like for you? How is this affecting you? How is it, you know, uh, how has it affected you? And, really just diving in deep and digging in deep and really hearing, listening to the other person, and take notes. If you have to, just take notes. And okay, this is how, he or she is feeling. I need to, make sure that I confirm that. Let me make sure that I understood what you said. Let me make sure that I really dig deep and understand, where you were. And here's where I am, or here's where I was. And that's what, my husband and I really had to do. And I then gained the perspective of what that looked like. It's not that he didn't have superpowers, he had amazing superpowers. I just couldn't see them because I had blinders on. But because God gave me the ability starting last year to look back through the story with different lenses and different perspectives, I was
Okay.
able to gain some sort of calmness and really sit down and have a conversation with him, that it wasn't anger and resentment, that he wasn't there for me. And God was there for me. I would have never been anywhere else. I think if I realized, if my husband would have come in and said, hey, I'm going to stay with her, I'm going to do this, I would have said, no, 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 you're not. I'm doing this, or we're both going to be there. I wouldn't have given up that role for anything in my entire life. I had the privilege of being there for her and advocating for her and helping her. So once I understood that my perspective was a bit broken, it allowed me to be humble and very genuine and soft as I entered those conversations with God, and especially with my husband.